Welcome to the Strength for Life podcast, where smart strength training meets real life. We're Dr. Matt and Nicole, founders of Village Fitness and Physical Therapy. Here, you'll learn what really works in the gym, at home, and for life. So a few weeks ago, I tweaked my back deadlifting 315 pounds. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what I did, what I didn't do, and the framework that Nicole and I use with our clients at Village when a tweak happens or an injury happens. Because if you train long enough, this will happen. And how you handle it determines whether you're back lifting weights in 2 weeks, 6 months, or you give it up completely forever.
So by the end of this episode, you'll know the difference between soreness, a tweak, and an actual injury, and why mixing these things up really derails a lot of people. You'll also learn whether strength training is actually dangerous, and this data surprises a lot of people. The next thing you'll learn is 5 things that prevent the majority of strength training injuries. And lastly, we'll cover exactly what to do in the workout when you injure yourself, the first 72 hours and the weeks after, so that you come back stronger instead of scared and afraid.
All right, so it's important to define some terms first. And there's kind of 3 different terms as it relates to injuries, tweaks, etc. So one is DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness. And this usually shows up in the 24 to 72 hours after a strength training session. And sometimes muscle soreness for somebody who's new to strength training can feel like they injured themselves. I can't tell you how many times physical therapy patients will come back after their first session and we did some kind of exercise that really got into one of their muscles, like their glutes, and they come back and they're like, my hip was in so much pain. And I ask them further questions and they point to where it hurts. And it's like, oh, it's your muscle hurts. You have a sore glute muscle because you used it for the first time. And it does hurt. Soreness is painful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially if you're new to training, DOMS can be tough to distinguish between like a muscle tweak versus an injury for your brain, because your brain is just like, what is happening? It's a little bit overloaded. Your nervous system is not used to that kind of stimulus. And so just the novelty of it for your brain can just alert your brain to be like, this hurts. Don't do that again. Usually
it improves with movement.
Mm-hmm.
Not an injury, doesn't require time off. We did a whole episode on muscle soreness that you're definitely going to want to listen to. Is it just a few episodes back, maybe in the last month or so?
Yep.
But just so you know, it can be so bad that it hurts to get up and down off the toilet. It hurts to walk, and makes you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't get down on the ground right now because my legs are so sore.
Or it hurts to fasten my bra because of push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that one often when people start doing push-ups again after they haven't done it for a while.
All right. So that's DOMS. The second category and the second term is a tweak, as we would call it. This is like a momentary when you're lifting, where you're like, oh no, I did something. Now this shouldn't come with any swelling, any bruising, any popping. Pain should be gone in like 1 to 7 days. And it's usually related to one of the following: either too much load, too much fatigue, bad form, or not enough warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really this is 90% of the problems that people have. Like 90% of the time when people have an issue, an injury, quote unquote, in a workout, it's usually just a small tweak. And we're going to talk a lot about what to do with a small tweak. What we're not going to address a ton is the final category, which is a real injury. And this is like sharp pain, swelling, bruising, an actual range of motion loss, popping or snapping, etc. This is like you have pain at rest, not just with movement. And this is something that's going to last longer than 7 to 10 days. It may not improve even in those 7 to 10 days. It's going to be really painful and it needs a professional evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah. I had one of these. I've had a couple of these throughout my life, but one was when we were first dating and we decided to go boating with my family. And I think I had only at this point ever water skied like 2 or 3 times ever in my life. I had wakeboarded quite a bit, but you guys were like, why don't you slalom ski? So I tried it.
Us guys, you don't make this seem like it was my fault.
It wasn't your fault. It was 100% mine.
I was just along for the
probably
ride.
trying to impress him. And so I was like, okay, I'll slalom ski. So I get up and then you saw it happen. I don't remember exactly, but somehow I ended up like in the splits in the water.
Yeah, your one foot came out.
Yeah.
And that foot went one way and the ski and the other foot went the other way.
And that was incredibly painful. So
and you heard a pop, yeah?
Yeah.
I felt a pop.
Yeah. And I was like,
It's your hamstring. Did you ever say
hamstring.
that?
It was my hamstring. Yeah, it was my hamstring. So bad. Like you guys had to pull me out of the water. I like couldn't move. I had to be carried up into the hotel room that night. And then you guys left me in the hotel room by myself and went to dinner. You went to dinner with my parents. You guys were like, okay, well, guess you can't go out with us.
Yeah, it was so funny. Nicole's parents that night, they sat me down and they were like kind of joking, but kind of serious. And they're like, you better have good health insurance. You're going to marry our daughter. You better have good health insurance.
Thankfully, I haven't had a bad injury like that since then.
Knock on wood.
I know. Seriously. I know. So
that was a real injury.
It was.
I remember I looked at your hamstring like the next day or like a week later and it was bruised.
Yeah. It was like visibly the whole back of my leg.
That's like a legit injury. You tore something.
And there's still times when I'm like, I feel like that hamstring's a little bit weaker, but it's like, it took a long time before even walking felt okay, let alone like running or sprinting or doing strength training. And I did a lot of like, hamstring exercises, but it was just a long time before I felt, back to normal and able to do strength training and running and cycling and all those things. Very different than a tweak.
Yeah. So an injury deserves a professional evaluation from a doctor of physical therapy or other medical professional. If you have any red flag symptoms, I feel like this is important to say, like numbness or tingling that's progressive, bowel and bladder changes, or you can't bear weight on a limb, like that's the kind of thing where you might need to go to urgent care or even the ER, especially if that stuff is getting progressively worse. But most injuries, even if they are injuries, they will recover on their own and they'll recover a lot faster if you get a professional evaluation. Mm-hmm. What I want to speak to in this podcast is I see a lot of people that treat a tweak like a real injury and wind up swearing off strength training because it's dangerous, because they tweak something. And I think that what people need to understand is that you're either going to build a strong, resilient body through resistance training and deal with the occasional tweak from time to time, or you're going to slowly become weaker, become fragile, and end up with legitimate injuries from just everyday life because you don't have the capacity to handle everyday life. And so you get to choose your hard, choose your challenge, and you'd be much wiser to choose the first one, which is getting strong and having to deal with occasional tweaks that come along with strength training that can be drastically minimized if you follow our advice that we're going to talk about in this podcast.
You want to talk about your recent back tweak?
So
what you did exactly?
I tweaked my back I think it was about 3 weeks ago now. I had just 4 days prior to my deadlift session, I had done a century bike ride where I rode 100 miles. And then I think I was probably still recovering from that bike ride when I went to do this deadlift workout. And also for context, I hadn't really been deadlifting much. The most I deadlifted recently was 275. I'd been trying to kind of not deadlift a whole lot as I was gearing up for the century. Just to make sure I was totally fresh and ready for that. And then I set a goal after the century. I was like, I'm going to deadlift 405 by the end of this quarter, which was way too aggressive, not smart. I would have coached a client to not do that, but it's sometimes really hard to coach yourself and be smart. So I was a dummy and I was like, oh, I'm just going to jump up to 315. And I have deadlifted like 375 in the last year. So I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. But it was very hard. And I have a video of it and I watched the video and I can see, it's like, oh, I can see my lower back rounding. It's not atrocious, but it's enough. It's like I can see, and I don't even think it was the form as much as my body just wasn't ready for that amount of load. and it set off my threat response within my nervous system, within my brain. So I had inflammation in my back. It put pressure on my nerves. I was getting like some sciatica-like symptoms. My back was really tight.
You went to Little League practice. You said you like bent down to pick up a ball and you're like, I don't know if I can get up.
Yeah, it was weird.
It's bad.
Yeah, I bent down to pick up a ball when I was throwing in the batting cages. And I was like, uh-oh. And I got back up and I like cracked my own back. And then I felt better because I know how to do that kind of thing. But anyways, it slowly worked its way out. And I followed a really specific lifting protocol that we're going to get into as I was recovering. And now I'm back to deadlifting again. I deadlifted 275, no issues last week. When I lift again this week, I'll do 285. And I'm just going to kind of work my way up by 10 pounds at a time until it, gets to the point where I need to go smaller jumps than that.
I had something similar that happened when I was training for my Hyrox back in January, and kind of similar thing. I was like, oh, I'm just going to drastically increase my running volume, and I'm just going to still maintain the same strength training protocol that I had been doing, which was, lifting heavy and progressing every single week. And so I did deadlifts one day and ran, because at that point I was running 6 days a week, because I was like, I've got to run more. And then the next day I ran, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna squat today. And so first off, probably just too much overall volume in the first place, and my back was already fatigued from running and deadlifting the previous day. And I went up to warm up like I normally do, and then I went into my first rep on my target set, and instantly I was like, I felt it in my low back. I was like, re-racked it. I think I did some like gentle foam rolling, some like glute bridges, and just tried to stay moving and tried not to sit. That was, I think, a big thing, was like, I just really tried to be like, okay, I'm going to, like rest it, but not just like sit all day. And then I think the next day I was like, this is still painful. I think I still went for like a light jog or something, just to like, again, stay moving. And then I saw Dr. Eric, and he used his little pointy tool and got in there, and it was really painful. But then after that, I felt a ton of relief, and I was like, okay, I feel better. And it took a couple more days. I didn't lift the rest of that week, because I was like, I'm just going to try to stay moving. I did a little bit of running that week, because again, I was like 4 weeks out from my Hyrox. So I was like, I don't want to lose what I've been working towards. But then when I did start squatting again, it was like probably a week and a half later, I started back. I like backed off the weight a little bit. And then I did continue to progress until Hyrox, but just at much smaller increments, because again, I think just overall volume and like the amount of fatigue that my body was facing was just really high at that point. And so it couldn't also handle that load. Again, the squats, like I think it was like maybe 125, which is not the heaviest that I've squatted before. Again, it was a similar thing to Matt, where I'm like, oh, I'll be fine. But I think my body was just telling me like, no. So a tweak, definitely not something where it was like, it sidelined me for months. But I think other people have experienced that, like, oh, I feel something in my back after squatting, and they're like, oh, I'm injured. And they instantly, sit down or lay down, and they're just, they let it sideline them. And so, I think today that we're hoping to give you a framework for what to do when that like, moment happens. And you should know that it's not serious too, if you can continue to move, and it's not something that you're like, again, laying on the ground,
For sure.
like able to put weight on it. And I think, it is, I think, for our brains and our bodies, like when you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, like this is, I'm in pain. And it's like, that's not a good feeling when you wake up the next day and your neck hurts or your back hurts or whatever. But a lot of times, actually movement, which we're going to get into, is like one of the best things that you can do. Not super heavy loaded movement, but there's a lot that you can do to help that tweak or, that moment to like not turn into something that is long-term.
So we have a YouTube channel that has hundreds of videos. A lot of them we've posted in the last couple of years, specifically on strength training for older adults. And we get a lot of comments on the videos. One of the consistent themes behind the comments is people saying it's irresponsible, or you shouldn't have older people lifting weights like that. They shouldn't be lifting heavy. They should be lifting light weights for high reps. They should be doing bodyweight exercises, yoga.
You should
Pilates.
never squat again. It's bad for
bad.
your hips and your back.
Yeah, it's like, that's bad. It's very black and white. Like, that's bad. And the reality is, yes, it's probably safer to do lighter weight. It's probably quote unquote safer to walk than it is to strength train. Maybe. But the problem with that is that if you never stress your body, it's going to get weaker. It's like, are you less likely to get a sunburn if you never go out in the sun? Yeah, probably. But then you're kind of like the bubble boy. You never experience stress. Over time, your body gets weaker. It's like, are you less likely to get sick if you never expose yourself to germs? Sure. But your immune system's never going to develop the defenses that it needs to actually fight things off. Because eventually you're going to have to go out in the world if you want to live a normal life.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's so interesting because, I think people think, strength training is dangerous, but the reality is that like most of daily living, if you're not strong, is
also
way, way more dangerous. And
more
it's kind of like
more
dangerous. It's kind of like the same thing where like people get so afraid of flying and yet they're not afraid to drive. And the likelihood of, you dying on an airplane versus in a car is way less. And so people just avoid flying altogether. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, but yet logically you're like, well, you do way more driving and you're way more likely to get hurt in a car accident and get in a car accident. It's the same thing. It's like, you're way more likely to fall and hurt yourself and end up in the hospital and die because you're weak and you didn't do anything about it than to, maybe sustain an injury or like a tweak that, might sideline you for a week or two. But in the long term, it's way more dangerous not to strength train than it is if you strength train, especially when you do it, slowly, safely, and with a coach.
Yeah. Now the stats show that strength training is actually pretty safe. The research that is most recent shows that you get about roughly 1 to 4 injuries per 1,000 hours of training. So you train so think about that. So if you train 3 hours a week for 50 weeks out of the year, that's 150 hours. That means you're getting an actual injury, every 6 to 10 years or so, which is I guess every two to 6 years, depending on, how you break those numbers up. Now, running, on the other hand, novice runners experience roughly 17 to 33 injuries per 1,000. That's like 8 times as many. So you're way more likely to get hurt doing a repetitive activity like running than you are doing something variable like strength training. All right. So we talked about the stress and the choosing your hard. Now let's get into how to not get hurt, strength training, and then we'll talk about what to do to recover.
Yeah. So the 5 pillars for not getting hurt in the first place. The first pillar is warm up properly. And I think this is one that a lot of people just blow by because when you're younger, you can just start doing something. And like you see this in kids, it's like they can just, go start jumping on a trampoline, like they're using all their muscles like really quickly and they're just totally fine. And, they can just start sprinting all of a sudden. Whereas adults, it's like, and the older that you get, the more you need to warm up and the more you need to raise your body temperature. It'll help your joints. It'll help your muscles. It'll help your nervous system if your body is warm. So what do you need to do to warm up properly? So ideally, you spend at least 5 minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes, raising your heart rate and your body temperature. So that can be doing things like going on the ski erg, the rower, jogging in place, doing, step out jacks. It can be anything that just like gets your heart rate up and gets your body warm. I love to do ski erg is my favorite thing to do during warm-ups because I feel like it just instantly gets my body warm. It gets my heart rate up. I also love doing things like inchworms because it just uses all the muscles in your body. You're also kind of stretching, push-ups, things where it's like my whole body is engaged and getting warm. And then you want to do a specific warm-up for whatever big lift that you're doing. So you don't want to just start, you warm up on the ski area and then all of a sudden you start squatting, 135. It's like you need to slowly progress in your lifts and ramp up to the actual set. So the warm-up set should not feel hard until like the last 1 to 2 warm-up sets. And they really help to wake up your nervous system and to tell your body, like, this is what we're doing. You need to recruit these muscle fibers to do this movement. And a lot of people, again, will skip this if they're short on time. They're like, oh, I'll just jump right in. Or we see this when people come in late to a session and they're like, I'll just skip the warm up and I'll just start squatting. Not a good idea. You want to make sure that you always always warm up.
So I do think, though, the most important component of a warm up for lifting weights is lifting weights. So if you're going to squat, you want to do squat warm ups. And so what we'll try and do with people is have them do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 warm up method. So 5 reps at about 50% of the weight that you're going to use for your working sets, 4 reps at 60%, 3 reps at 70, 2 reps at 80, and then 1 final rep at 90 to 100%. I think of all the things, like that is probably the most effective way to avoid injury.
Yeah. When I did my 200-pound deadlift this last week, I did about 3 minutes of ski erg. I did inchworm for a couple of minutes and a few push-ups. And then I jumped in.
A couple minutes of inchworms.
What?
A couple minutes, huh?
Yeah. I love inchworms. They're so
I didn't
good.
even know that about you.
I do them every single
There's
workout.
so many things I don't know about you.
And then for my warm-ups for deadlifts, I did 65, and then I did 95, 135, 175, and then I did one set at 195, 1 rep before I went into my 200-pound deadlifts. And then in between my warm-up sets, sometimes I'll do village curl, or I'll do an upper body movement that just, like forward fold to reach, or cactus, just something that I'm staying moving. And then that way I don't get cold, especially in the winter when it's colder. I try to not just sit. Some people like to do that. I will not name them, but I like to stay warm in between my target sets.
Interesting. I think you're talking about me. Okay. Number 2, use good form. So this is important for 2 reasons. One, when you use good form, you're less likely to get hurt. If your back's not rounded when you're doing deadlifts like mine was, you're probably less likely to put stress in your back and more likely to put the stress in your muscles, to put it simply. And the second thing that good form does is it puts kind of like a ceiling on the load that you use. So I was watching a client years ago do an overhead press, and their back was arched like crazy. They weren't going down all the way. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could just tell like that's too much weight for this person. And they should be doing. And the reason I knew that was because they couldn't do it with the right form. It's like that should be kind of like the governor or the limiter on how much weight you can use. And if you blow past that, yeah, you could probably do a little bit more weight with bad form. But should you? No, you should not. You want to use that as the top end of the weight that you can use. And you should always be able to, unless you're benchmark week, like maxing out, you should always have a few reps in the tank with good form when you finish a set. And if you can't, you don't have any business doing that weight.
Yep.
I watched a client overhead press last week when I was coaching. I coach 1 session a week. It's very fun. I love it. Sometimes inappropriate songs come on the playlist.
Because some of us don't know how to use Smart Shuffle on Spotify.
Yeah. Yeah, when
he tries to blame. So we coach the same group of
It
clients.
Wasn't Me by Shaggy came on. It Wasn't Me, which is, not an appropriate song. And I was like, oh, I thought Nicole picked the playlist. I
do pick the playlist.
I was like, all right, I guess this is okay. And then one of the clients started singing it, and I was like, I got to change the song. I'm sorry, Nicole. And I went and told everybody about it after, and they're like, oh, you had Smart Shuffle on, where Spotify picks the songs for you.
Yeah, and you were trying to blame it on me to the clients.
I wasn't blaming it. Oh yeah, to the clients.
To the clients.
I blame all kinds of things on you to the clients.
They were like, "Oh, I heard that you're the one that we're supposed to talk to."
Really?
Yeah.
They said.
Matt said that you're in charge of the playlist.
Well, I tell them to come to you with complaints if they have any compliments and affirmations. Talk to me.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, so there was a client that was doing overhead press, and she on her first target set, like, she was like doing weird things with one of her elbows where it was like pressing up on that side and the other side wasn't going up. And she like had to push one side up first and then the other side. And I was like, well, that's not normal. So I said, how about we drop the weight down for your second set? And we did. And it was like, oh, that's an easy choice to make. Like, could she have done another set of 5 with that form? Probably. But should she? No. And there's a big difference between can and should. And so if you're looking in a mirror or if you're doing your workout and you notice that, or you feel that your form is off, you can feel it. The longer you've been training, the more you can feel that something's different. Don't keep going.
The third thing to focus on with injuries is to fully focus on the exercise.
Third thing to focus on is focus.
The third thing to focus on.
The most important thing about focus is focus.
So I think especially with phones these days and with all the other things that are happening, for me, a lot of times it's children. But I have started to say things like, mommy is going to do her target set. Please don't talk to me. I do this in the mornings. And I need you to stay back so that I don't have to worry about them getting injured. Because I don't want to think about like, are they too close? Is the bar going to hit them? Especially on things like squats.
Our children are going to have so much to unpack with their therapist one day.
I know they are.
My mom made me go inside when she did her target sets.
No, I don't. They're doing a good job. So like this morning, Clara said, I backed up to do my lunges. And I said, thank you, Clara. But it's just that like, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm fully focused on the muscles that I'm going to be using. And my body is like fully engaged in this, because when we're distracted, I think probably women more than men, we're usually trying to multitask. Then that's when like your body isn't as attuned. You're not recruiting the same amount of muscles, fibers when you go to do that exercise. And it's going to be more likely to injure yourself. Or it's doing silly things like I was unloading the bar and not paying attention and I tweaked my back. Or you do dumb things like yesterday I was talking to one of my kids and I was putting a weight on the bar, wasn't paying attention, and I pinched my finger in between the plate and the bar. I was like, that was so dumb. And now my finger's bruised. And so little things like that can happen when you're not paying attention. So focus on what you're doing. Be really present. The weights are heavy and can hurt you if you don't pay attention. So focus on what you're doing.
Yeah. I like to think of barbells kind of like a knife. It's like a knife is a really useful tool for cutting things, and a dull knife sucks.
It's
worst. Terrible to cut a sweet potato with a dull knife.
Gosh, or carrot.
Or
cut
like bell
myself
peppers.
With carrots with dull knives. I've cut my finger like twice doing that.
Well, it's just annoying too. It's like it doesn't work as well. And it's like a barbell is the same thing. It's a sharp tool to accomplish a specific job, but it has to be used appropriately or else it can hurt you. Just like anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, you got to start at the right level. This is number 4. And obviously my 315 deadlift story, I was not at the right level that day for me. I've done a P90X in the past, P90X3 with Tony Horton, my guy. He does a ton of push-ups in his program. And every time I try to go through that program, I haven't done it in years, but when I try to go through, it's like my shoulders would start hurting because I went from 0 push-ups to like 300 push-ups in a week. It's like, yeah, that's dumb. Why did you do that? I don't know. But I did.
I see this a lot too with clients who've come back either after like vacations or,
or
maybe
used to train in high school.
Or I would say it's more so I'm seeing like we do see definitely that the people who say like, I used to do this when I was in high school or in college. And it's like, well, that was 40 years ago. So maybe we need to take a step back, but not as much women. That's more men. But in general, I hear things like, oh, like, a couple benchmark weeks ago, I hit this and now I'm only here. And then we go back through what they've done over the last couple quarters. It's like, oh, I went to Europe for a week. Oh, I went to go visit my grandkids because my daughter had a baby. And, I helped her for 6 weeks and only worked out a couple times over that time. And they've been inconsistent. And so they come back, kind of like your deadlift, story. And they think like, I should be able to do this because I did this a few quarters ago or a year ago or whatever. And it's like, you can't. Like you have to back off from what you did previously. And so we even do that. Like when we start off the beginning of the quarter, we usually tell people to back off between 10 to 20% of their weight. But that should also apply when you've taken a break, whether it's for vacation or sickness or whatever it is. Because there's no reason. It's like, there's no reason to overdo it for that day just because you feel like you should be at that weight.
Nice. All right. Number 5, progress appropriately. Add weight only when the current weight moves with good form, reasonable effort, and you can finish the set, all the sets actually, with a couple good reps in the tank. So for somebody who's new to strength training, a beginner or a novice, you're going to add like 2.5 to maybe 10 pounds per workout per exercise. So the 2.5 would be more for somebody who's older or very deconditioned, or on an exercise like an overhead press where you're using smaller muscles and the ceiling is much lower. On an exercise with a higher ceiling, like a deadlift, and somebody who's younger, who recovers quickly, you're going to use a bigger jump per workout, like maybe 10 pounds per exercise. That's the fastest way to avoid getting hurt is progressing appropriately.
Yep. And I would say that, like, when in doubt, progress more slowly than more quickly, especially because most people that we train are older. And so it's like, if you're like, should I really push it? Maybe during benchmark week because you're just doing one set. But most weeks, I think erring on the side of being more conservative it's never going to be a bad thing. Like, maybe you progress a little bit more slowly. Like, that's okay, because strength training is something you should be doing for the rest of your life. And so I know people are like excited and they want to see progress, but I think sometimes it's like we let that get in the way of just being like, I just want to get stronger and progress each week, and they push it too much. So progress appropriately and listen to your coaches, because they have your best interests at heart. And a lot of times
that's what I tell my baseball kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, if I tell you to steal second base, it's a good thing for the team. It's not because I want you to get out. It's because I think that's what's best.
In case you're wondering, we're in the middle of playoffs for Little League, and this is like all we talk about in the Klingler household right now is Little League baseball. Another thing to note, this is like a bonus. This is not one of the 5
Let me
things.
take this one.
Okay.
Hydrate. I've torn my meniscus twice wrestling, and I was severely dehydrated both times. I'd been cutting a lot of weight, and I don't think that was a coincidence. As I've reflected on this, over the last 15, 20 years since those injuries happened, I think being really dehydrated played a big role. The first time I tore my meniscus, I'd cut 10 pounds to make weight. The second time was very last tournament of the season when I was in junior college. It was like the California State tournament. And I had to cut weight 2 days in a row to make my weight class. And I had to cut like 10 pounds in a matter of 6 hours the second day to make weight. And I went to wrestle my first match and it just felt like garbage. And I remember the guy got my knee in a weird position and put his elbow into my knee. And it wasn't like something that would normally cause an injury, I wouldn't think. But I think my tissues were just slightly dehydrated. And so, tore my meniscus, felt it happen. So I think a lot of injuries can be avoided by just being properly hydrated. So drink some water before you train, add some electrolytes to it or some trace minerals. Something like Element works great for that. And then just make sure you have enough water in the system before you go lift.
Right.
So single biggest factor in predicting an injury, though, is if you've had that injury before. And they used to say in PT school, the single greatest predictor of tearing your ACL is having torn that ACL previously. Same thing with back injuries. Like if you've hurt your back before, that's probably the single greatest predictor that you're going to hurt your back again. So if you've had an injury or history of injury, you need to really, really double down on following the steps we laid out and avoiding those 5 things.
Yep. So now we're going to talk about how to manage injuries when they happen, or tweaks. So in the workout, like the moment it happens, so, you're squatting, you feel that your back, or you're deadlifting, you feel your back. What should you do? We're going to talk about the 4 different things that you should do in the moment. The first is you want to just
stop, drop, and roll.
Stop. Just stop. Don't necessarily drop and roll, because then people might actually think you're.
Do you remember in grade school?
Oh yeah.
Did you guys practice that?
Oh yeah. Stop dropping.
Man.
Yeah, we did.
Practiced. So I was Northern California. We'd be ready for those earthquakes. We would practice getting under our desks.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I remember thinking, I was like, this isn't going to work.
I thought the same. I'm like, this desk is like plywood.
Yeah,
this is not going to help. Oh, so funny. So stop, re-rack the bar. Don't do let me just see if I can do a couple more reps. Just pause what you're doing. Tell your coach. I would say move around. So walk around, try to breathe, and try not to catastrophize. Oh no, I'm injured forever. Because if your brain starts to sense danger, it just gets worse. So
when I ride my bike a lot and lift weights at the same time, my little adductors get tight, and I'll feel it as I'm warming up, as I'm lifting.
They're not
I'm
little. They're big.
Thank you. I'm going to let that compliment's going to carry with me for the rest of the day. So I'll feel it happen. I'm like, oh, it's getting tight. It's getting tight. And I just know it gets past a certain point where it's like, it's only going to get worse. And sometimes I try to push it and finish my set. And then it's like, it's tight for 3 or 4 days and it affects my ability to squat for a while. And it's like, you just got to know, when you feel something funky, stop the set.
Yeah. So stop. I would say move around. After a couple of minutes, you could gently test that body weight.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I still feel it
At all,
then just don't do the rest of that target set. Stop doing that.
If I feel my adductor when I'm squatting, it's like, I just kind of need to be done with squats and go to something else.
Yeah.
I can probably do deadlifts, no issues. I can definitely do overhead press, bench press, pull-ups, push-ups, but I need to probably leave squats alone.
Yeah. So that's the fourth thing, is to pivot, don't quit. So don't just be like, oh, I'm just done with my workout. Now, if you really feel like your body needs it and you just need to go for a walk, maybe, but a lot of times you can do things like if you tweak your upper body, you can do some lower body things that are lower level. If you do something to your lower body, you could do some upper body movements. But again, just don't go back to that same exercise heavy, because again, it's not gonna, it could turn, something that's a tweak could turn into something that's a longer term injury if you decide to push it too much that day.
Yep. Okay. So how about after? So you get an injury or you get a tweak. What do you do in the short term after it happens and then long term after it happens? So we were taught when I was growing up and in school to follow the RICE method: rest, ice, compression, elevation. So anytime you get an injury, you rest it, you ice it, you compress it, you elevate it. And recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, that's been flipped on its head. At least a lot of it has been flipped on its head. And there's a new line of thinking which aligns a lot more cleanly with what we've been talking about in this podcast and on all of our past episodes. And it's peace and love.
I love it.
Yeah. You peace and you love it. So peace is what you do in the 0 to 72 hours after a tweak or an injury. And love is what you do forever. Just kidding. That's what you do after 72 hours and beyond. So let's go through each of the letters. So P is protect. E is elevate. A is avoid anti-inflammatories. C is compress. And E is educate. So let's go through each of those. So this is the 1 to 3 days after an actual injury, or maybe even after a tweak. So P, protect. Avoid the painful movement, but not all movement. So in my case with my back tweak, I avoided doing deadlifts, and apparently I didn't avoid bending over because I, kind of had the issue with my picking up with baseballs off the ground. The more low level the movement, the better. I think if you can get out and walk a bunch, when I tweaked my back, I skipped my workout the next morning because I just felt like I needed to, but I was feeling pretty good by midday, and I went for a jog that afternoon and did some jogging. E is elevate when relevant. So for a back injury, it's a little bit difficult to elevate your back. But if you injure your wrist or your knee, you can definitely elevate it above the level of your heart. And that still is a very relevant thing to do, according to the current research. A is avoid anti-inflammatories because they slow the inflammatory and the healing process. Very counterintuitive. People think I hurt myself, I need anti-inflammatories. Now, I think there's a time and a place for anti-inflammatories, which we don't need to get into on this podcast, but when your body's trying to recover and heal, that's probably not the time. And I did that when I avoided my back tweak. I didn't take any drugs. Compress, especially if there's swelling. If you tweak your knee, put a compression wrap on it. We use tissue floss in the clinic. And a lot of the effect of that is just the compression. It makes things feel stable and secure and helps with the healing process. And then E is educate. Understand that your body is healing, that it's normal. Don't catastrophize like we've talked about. Listen to podcasts like this. This is all part of fulfilling that E component of peace.
Right. Let's move on to love. So L is for load. O is for optimism. V is for vascularization, and E is for exercise. So load should be gentle, and you should gradually progress, just like we talked about earlier, like not just going back to that. So if Matt, went back to deadlifting and he's like, I'm just going to do 315 a couple days later, like probably not a good idea. You should probably back the load off and gradually progress back to 315.
But this is the one that's very new.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of the previous thinking was like, you don't load. You wait until it never doesn't hurt anymore at all. And then you start to build back up. But this is like, no, like we're going to start to use that muscle, that body part pretty quick. And I've seen this change even post-surgery. I know and postpartum, like they're getting moms up and getting them going. It saves the hospital money, I'm sure, but also it's good for them. Like you want to start moving and using your body as quick as possible, because that's what actually shows the best outcomes. And part of it is just that being sedentary and bed rest is so bad for us as human beings. We can lose 10% of our muscle mass in 10 days if we're bed bound. So that's why it's like, you got to get back to loading. And even when you injure yourself or tweak something, it's like, it's really important to fairly quickly get back on the load train.
Yep. Next up is optimism. So your nervous system listens when you are telling yourself like, this is going to get better. If you are telling yourself like, oh no, I hurt my back. This is gonna, affect the rest of my life. I'm never gonna be able to do X, Y, and Z. Like your nervous system is gonna be on high alert. Cortisol is gonna be increased, like all the stress hormones. And it's gonna be harder for your body to recover. Like hormones drastically affect your mood. They drastically affect your healing process, your blood sugar. Like it has a huge effect. And a lot of that, it's not to say like, oh, it's all in your head, but it's like, if you're going worst case scenario, you're Googling and it's like this random thing is going to happen to me because this happened, then like it's not going to help you with your recovery. And so I think just knowing, okay, this is going to get better. It is going to improve, and telling yourself that every day is actually going to help your healing process.
So I worked with a lot of chronic pain patients when I was doing my residency in physical therapy, and I would get to see all their medical conditions in my chart. Almost every single person with chronic pain had anxiety in their chart. And it's like anxiety activates the same parts of the brain responsible for pain. They're so intricately connected. It's like, if you're anxious about things hurting, things are going to hurt. And obviously it's difficult to like think yourself any way, shape, or form. But I think you can alter your actions first. Like we talked about, not getting on there with Dr. Google, and then your thoughts will follow. You can alter your words that you speak, and then your beliefs will follow. So,
yeah. Next up is vascularization. So get blood flowing, like we talked about already, like just low level movement. And again, this is like a feedback loop to optimism, because the more you exercise, like your body does release endorphins, and you'll feel better if you get outside and go for a walk than if you lay on the couch and, ice your back and take anti-inflammatories. Like you will. Like it might initially be uncomfortable, but in the long term, you'll feel way better if you get outside and you start moving your body and get blood flowing to those areas, versus just laying, like Matt said, bed rest is like the worst thing that you can do for your body for recovery.
Last one is exercise, which I think is pretty similar.
Yeah.
All right. I also wanted to share, we did a great podcast with Dr. Jonathan Sullivan. He's a physician, author of the Barbell Prescription. He's a hero of mine in the strength training space. And he shared with us, it was episode 17. So if you want to listen to it, one of my favorite episodes that we've done. It's a really cool moment to get to do that podcast with him. But he shared with us this 1-3-5 protocol for coming back from a tweak. So let's say you're doing squats and you feel something in your butt. You decide, I'm going to be done for today. Now, you come back the next session, things are feeling okay. You start to warm up carefully, and you find your quote unquote safe single. So he calls this the 1. This is the heaviest weight that you can do that feels completely fine for 1 rep. So let's say that you tweaked your butt muscle doing 200 pounds for squats. You work yourself back up to 100 pounds for easy math. And that's like, I did one at 100. That's all I feel comfortable with today. So you drop the weight by 20%, you do 3 reps. So that'd be 80 pounds for 3. Drop by another 20%. So back down to 60 pounds, you do 5 reps, and that's your workout for the day. So you did that 1 at 100, 2 at 80, 3 at 80, and then 5 at 60. Next workout back, you do the exact same thing. You work up to what you can do for a safe single. So let's say by the next workout back, you're back up to 200 for a safe single. Drop down 20% to 160, and you do 3 reps. Drop down another 20% to 120. You do 5 reps. And once you're, built up by, I'd say once you can go get that 5 back to what you were doing before, you're probably good to go.
Yeah. I love that. So that would be, after you've gone through that initial piece, first 48 to, 72 hours that's when you would go back to that protocol. If you tweak your back, you probably shouldn't go do that protocol the next day. If you do that on a Wednesday, you shouldn't go do that Thursday. I would give yourself a couple of days and maybe try it on, Friday at the soonest, probably more like Saturday or even the following Monday before you go back to that specific movement, depending on how much pain you're experiencing.
Let's talk about, we touched on red flags. I want to add a few more. So these are go see a doctor, go to the ER kind of things if you notice them. If you're in pain and it's not improving after 7 to 10 days, go see a physical therapist for that. Pain that wakes you up at night, go see a physical therapist. Numbness, tingling, weakness, go see a physical therapist. Now, if it's progressive and aggressively progressive, you may want to go to the ER for something like that. None of this is medical advice. Please talk to your doctor before you do anything. Visible swelling, bruising, that may just go away on its own, but it can also indicate an injury. And some people just bruise really easily and swell easily. So that might not be a reason to rush to a physical therapist. If you can't bear weight or use a joint, that's a good reason to go to a physical therapist, or maybe even if it's bad enough you think you broke something, you probably want to get some imaging done. Loss of bowel and bladder control, emergency room, same day. That's not good. A pop or snap, immediate loss of function, go see a physical therapist. If your urine changes color and becomes brown because you lifted so hard, you may have rhabdomyolysis. You probably want to go to the ER. Very rare, but it can happen. All right. We're definitely not telling people to tough out something serious. We're telling you that 95% of the time when people tweak themselves, they recover very quickly. And then the other 5% that maybe becomes an injury or is a more serious thing, that's where you want to, understand the difference between these things.
And go get help.
Yeah.
And more quickly rather than, holding off and saying oh, it'll be fine. So hopefully takeaway summary from this is mindset is really important with injuries, and tweaks are going to happen. They're part of life. They're part of strength training. And I think the more comfortable you get with that idea, the less fearful you'll be. And actually in the long term, you'll probably heal a lot more quickly if you're, expecting that. And then also being optimistic in your body's ability to recover and to heal from those things, knowing you're not going to lose all your progress. And the worst thing that you can do is just to stop strength training altogether and not come back to it, which we have had people do. They're like, oh, I hurt my shoulder a little bit or my back, and I'm just going to be done. This isn't safe. And so know that, tweaks are part of training, and over time, your tissues will heal, your capacity will rebuild, and trust the process, trust your coaches and listen to them, because a lot of times tweaks happen when people are not listening to their coaches, or they're, pushing it too much too soon. We've owned in on that over and over at this time. So I think every tweak that I've gotten, I've learned something. It's just those, it's someone can tell you all the things, and until you experience it for yourself, sometimes you're just, you have to learn for yourself that maybe I pushed it a little bit too hard. And so use those mistakes and the failures that you make to, help you get stronger and to not make that same mistake again.
Love it. So hopefully you learned in this podcast that tweaks are an inevitable part of strength training, and your goal should not be to avoid strength training because you never want to experience that, but rather to do strength training safely and effectively and implement all the stuff we talked about in this podcast. And then if they do happen, which they will, follow the advice we gave you here and bounce back quickly, learn from it, and grow.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time, I'm Dr. Matt.
And I'm Nicole Klingler. Thanks for listening.